thank everybody who is here.
You could almost hear the moment instant regret was supposed to hit Jasmine Paolini when center court cheered for Alex Eala instead of her. Except that isn't quite what happened, and the truer story is stranger and better than the headline suggests. If you were sitting in the upper tier of center court on the afternoon of July 6, 2026, you noticed it before either player did. The chairs are dark green, the air was 31 degrees, and by the time the two women walked out, the applause had already tilted. It didn't tilt loudly. Wimbledon crowds don't do loud. It tilted the way tennis crowds tilt at Wimbledon, which is by a fraction of a second. The applause for the 21-year-old from the Philippines started a beat sooner and ran a beat longer than the applause for the Italian, who had reached the final on this same court 2 years earlier. Alex Eala noticed. Jasmine Paolini noticed. Everyone in that stadium noticed. And by the end of 2 hours and 22 minutes, the scoreboard would say one thing, and the room would say another. To understand why a center court crowd behaved that way, you have to understand what had happened 48 hours earlier. On Saturday, July 4th, Eala walked onto that same court, seeded 29th, ranked in the low 30s, and beat defending Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek 7-6, 6-2, winning that opening set tiebreak 11 points to 9. It was, by the WTA's own record, the first time any player from the Philippines had reached the fourth round of a major in the Open era. By Monday morning, Wimbledon's official YouTube channel had logged 1.2 million views on the highlight package of that match, more than twice what videos of Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams from the same tournament had drawn by that point. According to one Guardian reporter covering the grounds, the room that walked in to watch her play, Paolini, already knew what it had. Here's where the story needs to be careful, because a headline can promise more than the tape actually shows. Paolini did not lose this match to a hostile crowd. Paolini won it 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. She reached her first Grand Slam quarterfinal in 2 years. In her on-court interview, she thanked Roger Federer, who was watching from the royal box. In her press conference, she called joy her superpower. There is no clip of her scowling at the crowd. No quote of her expressing any regret about the noise. What actually happened is more interesting than that. Before this match, Paolini herself, in an interview clip that circulated on Tennis Channel, publicly acknowledged that the Wimbledon crowd would be behind Eala. She saw it coming. She named it out loud. And she still had to walk into it. The story isn't that a great player was betrayed by a home crowd she thought she owned. The story is that center court for one afternoon adopted somebody else, and both women knew it before the first serve was struck. The Guardian's match report used the phrase, wins hearts and minds. Yahoo Sports, covering the same afternoon, described the crowd as partisan and called it, this is the important word, unusual, given Paolini's own popularity. That's the phrase that tells you what actually happened. Paolini is a beloved figure at Wimbledon. 2 years earlier, in 2024, this same crowd fell in love with her bubbly personality on this same court during her run to the final against Barbara Krejcikova. The BBC's coverage of that fortnight is full of it. She has, in tennis writer language, equity here. And for one round on one day in one summer, that equity got outvoted by a 21-year-old who'd spent the previous 48 hours going viral in the specific way only Wimbledon can produce. So what did the room actually do? It cheered when Eala was tense in the opening service game, and she held it. It stayed patient as her first serve started arriving across the net slower than usual and going in barely half the time. It watched her lose the first set, and it didn't fold. Then, at the start of the second set, when Eala fell behind on break points and started clawing back, when she saved chances, broke Paolini, and held for a lead, center court finally let itself go. The Guardian reporter sitting a few rows away described it exactly as it happened. Loud cheers of, let's go, Alex. That's the sound of the tilt. That's the moment we're actually talking about when we talk about this match. Not a betrayal. A recognition. And the reason it's worth your time is that center court doesn't do this often. It didn't do it for Emma Raducanu until she was already deep into a major. It didn't do it for Coco Gauff on her Wimbledon debut. It didn't fully do it for Paolini herself until she was in the semi-final in 2024. Alex Eala got adopted in the round of 16, seeded 29th, ranked 32nd in the world, without ever having won a WTA singles title. That's the anomaly. That's the story. And the numbers are how we know it wasn't just a feeling in the room. Start with the YouTube number, because it's the number that shows this wasn't only happening inside the stadium. 2 million views on the match highlight by Monday, more than double the Djokovic and Serena packages from the same fortnight on Wimbledon's own channel, so the accounting is unambiguous. Whatever was happening on center court was already happening globally, and the people paying to sit in those chairs on Monday were, in a sense, ratifying what the internet had spent the weekend deciding. Then there's the seeding and ranking. Eala arrived at this Wimbledon seeded 29th, per the official draw. Her WTA singles ranking sat at 32. Her career prize money, as of the most recent update, was reported at $871,438. She had 0 WTA singles titles. Paolini, by contrast, entered as the 13th seed, with a French Open final and a Wimbledon final already on her resume. And even so, the room chose the other one. Not because Paolini had done anything wrong, because Eala had done something the seats couldn't stop replaying. Then there's the head-to-head, because it explains why Paolini walked in wary. Their first career meeting had come earlier in 2026 at the WTA 1000 in Dubai, where Eala won 6-1, 7-6, sending Paolini out in the second round. On the tape, you can watch Paolini congratulate her with real warmth. That's context. That's a player who knew, walking onto center court, that she'd lost to this opponent before, and that the crowd wasn't going to help her the way it usually did. She won anyway. That's the part of the story a catchy title can obscure, and this one won't. Take a breath here, because the middle of a match on grass in 31-degree heat isn't a place for a tidy narrative. What Eala did in that second set was, in the technical sense, a rescue. She saved 3 break points at the start of the set, then went and broke Paolini, then served it out to make it 1 set apiece. At that point, by one tally, Paolini had won 69 points and Eala 68, 1 point apart, after nearly an hour and a half. And this is where the emotional climax of the afternoon actually lives. Not at match point, not at any single winner, but in the noise the stadium made when it realized this was going to a third set. That noise, let's go, Alex, is the sound of a crowd being surprised by its own preference. The people in those seats had bought tickets weeks or months earlier. Statistically, many of them weren't Filipino. Wimbledon doesn't sell that many tickets to Manila. What they were doing in real time was picking, watching a player they'd never heard of a year earlier, and deciding, out loud, that they wanted her to win. Paolini has said, in her own words, in that pre-match Tennis Channel clip, that she believed the crowd would be behind Eala. What she probably couldn't have prepared for was how much they'd be behind her, on this court, in this round, this early. Then, because tennis isn't sentimental, the third set arrived, and the serve arrived with it. Because on grass, a crowd can carry you only as far as the mechanics allow, and no further. At 4-3 in the decider, Eala made consecutive errors and was broken. One report captured a first serve in the closing stretch that barely cracked 65 miles an hour, a number that, if you follow tour tennis, tells you what happened before the announcer has to. Paolini, meanwhile, improved from winning less than half her first serve points earlier in the match to 94% in the third set, according to one match summary. She held again. She served out the match, by the BBC's clock, after 2 hours and 22 minutes. Federer applauded from the royal box, and Paolini said afterward, on court, something to the effect that she wanted to thank Roger, her idol, and that during the match she'd tried to stay focused and not think too much about him being there. 2 players, 2 speeches after the match. Read them in sequence, and you'll understand why the instant regret framing of this story doesn't hold up. Paolini, per the BBC's transcript of her on-court interview, it was really tough, a roller coaster. There were tough moments, but I kept working with my team supporting me. I love what I do, but I have to enjoy it. It's my superpower. That is not the language of a player who left center court bitter about the crowd's affections. That's a player who has already processed the particular Wimbledon truth that this stadium picks whoever it wants to pick, and decided her job is to play tennis anyway. Now read Eala from her post-match press conference the same afternoon. Never say die, and play every point like your life depends on it. And when asked about her serve, which had abandoned her at the worst possible moment, something like, my serve wasn't as good as in some other matches, but I have days like that. Everyone has days where they don't play their best. I understand that's part of the job. I don't expect to be playing the best tennis of my life every single day. She's 21 years old. That is a professional talking. Then this, the line that tells you why the crowd chose her in the first place. Of course, there are things I would have liked to do differently, but in the end, that's just tennis. And that's also what's beautiful about tennis. Rooms respond to composure. Rooms respond to a player who has just lost the biggest match of her life and can, in a single sentence, tell you what she loves about the sport that just beat her. Zoom out from center court for a moment, because the scale of this is worth naming precisely. Eala is, per the BBC's confirmation, the first player from the Philippines to reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam in the Open era. That's a national first, not a regional one. The Open era begins in 1968, meaning 58 years of professional tennis history had passed without a Filipino name reaching this stage of a major. Reporting confirmed that after the win, the Philippine president publicly praised her, and watch-along parties were organized around the country for the Paolini match. Beyond the Philippines, Wimbledon's own YouTube analytics won 2 million views on one highlight package by Monday morning, outpacing Djokovic and Serena content from the same tournament. Tell you the story had already broken out of the diaspora. It was Wimbledon-wide. It was global. Fans on Reddit's r/tennis, in threads following her earlier Dubai win over Paolini, had been discussing the phenomenon for months. One commenter, cited in a thread from that Dubai round, put it plainly, "Once it grows, it cannot be stopped." That's fan sentiment, not fact, and it's offered here as exactly that, but it captures something true about the tilt. Here's what needs to be said honestly about the vulnerability in this moment, because the story owes it. Eala lost this match for a specific reason, and the reason isn't the crowd. Her first serve went missing. One report captured a moment at 4-1 down in the first set when she hit a first serve that barely reached the net, then sent her second serve long. That's not a metaphor for anything. That's a mechanical breakdown at a specific score. Her serve has been the identified vulnerability in her game through the 2026 season, and center court, against a former Grand Slam finalist, is exactly where that kind of vulnerability gets exposed. She said so herself. No injury was reported. No excuse was offered. The North American hard court swing is next. Montreal or Toronto for the Canadian Open, then Cincinnati, then the US Open. That's where the next chapter of this story gets written, on a surface that, if she wants it to, will likely forgive her serve more than grass did. So what does center court cheering for Alex Eala instead of Jasmine Paolini actually mean? Once you strip away the framing, it means the room made a choice, and the choice was legitimate, and the player it chose is still on tour. It means Paolini won the match and didn't lose the day, because her tennis was better in the moments when tennis was all that mattered. It means the head-to-head between these two now stands at 1 win apiece. Not a gap, but a kind of parity held together by a couple of games at the end of a long third set. And it means that the next time Eala walks onto center court, she won't be walking on as a curiosity. She'll be walking on as somebody who has been there, who has beaten a defending champion there, who has been cheered there, and who left it, according to the Guardian's account, making the shape of a heart with her hands as she walked off. That gesture is the closing image, not a trophy, not a match point. A 21-year-old thinking, with her hands, a stadium that had thanked her first. She belongs on that court. That is the honest verdict of July 6th. 2026. Not that Paolini regretted anything. Not that a torch got passed. Not that anybody's era ended. Just that a player who a year ago was ranked 140th in the world walked onto the most famous grass court in tennis twice in 3 days and made it choose. She lost the second time. She still made it choose. And the 2 million people who had watched the Swiatek highlight by Monday morning kept watching after Monday. That number kept climbing. It's climbing as you listen to this. The next tournament is Canada. After that, Cincinnati. After that, the US Open on hard court, a surface she's done real damage on before, with a semi-final run in Miami back in 2025, where she took out a Grand Slam champion for the first time. If you want to see whether center court knew what it was doing, watch the hard court summer. Watch whether the room that chose her at Wimbledon turns out to have been early or exactly on time. Thank you for watching. Stay for the next one. Tennis Unfiltered.